Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with Mark today. Mark, I've been reflecting on your international journey lately. You didn't just go for a holiday, you actually relocated to Spain and Japan. What first sparked that desire? What possessed you to pack up your entire life and move across the ocean?
Hi, Anna. It's wonderful to be back. That's a deep question to start with. Honestly, it was a complex mix of curiosity and a bit of restlessness. I think many of our listeners can relate to that feeling of being stuck in a routine. Back home, I felt like I was living on autopilot. I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could survive in a place where I didn't know the language or the local etiquette. It's a bit of a daunting prospect at first, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think daunting is the perfect word. Most people stay in their comfort zones because the thought of navigating a foreign bureaucracy, things like visas and residency permits, or even just a grocery store feels overwhelming. Did you have a specific light bulb moment where you decided, okay, I'm actually doing this?
It was actually a Tuesday morning at the office. I looked at my calendar and realized the next 5 years looked exactly like the last five. I felt a sudden urge to experience something completely alien to me. I started researching the push and pull factors. The push was my boredom, and the pull was the vibrant culture and history of places like Madrid and Tokyo.
Interesting. Some people move away from something while others move towards something. It sounds like you were doing both. But what about the practical side? The logistics of moving abroad are a nightmare. How did you handle the initial anxiety of leaving your friends and family behind?
That was the hardest part, Anna. There's a lot of guilt associated with leaving. You feel like you're abandoning your social circle. But I had to remind myself that true friendships can withstand the distance. I spent months decluttering my apartment and selling my belongings. It was actually quite liberating to realize how little I actually needed to be happy.
I love that. The idea that minimalism goes hand in hand with moving abroad. It forces you to prioritize what truly matters. But surely you must have had some second thoughts before you boarded that plane.
Oh, dozens. The night before my flight to Spain, I sat on my suitcase and thought, am I making the biggest mistake of my life? I was terrified of failure. What if I couldn't find a job? What if I couldn't make friends? But then I realized that the fear of regret was much stronger than the fear of failure.
That is a powerful sentiment. The fear of regret is stronger than the fear of failure. I think that's a motto many of our intermediate learners can apply to their language studies, too. You have to take that leap of faith to see what you're truly capable of.
Exactly. If you never leave your bubble, you never realize how many of your common sense beliefs are actually just cultural habits. You don't just see a new country, you see your old country through a new lens.
People always talk about culture shock as if it's just one bad day, but it's actually a process, isn't it? Did you experience those famous stages? The honeymoon phase followed by that sudden crashing frustration?
Oh, 100%. It's actually quite predictable once you look back on it. When I first arrived in Tokyo, I was in a state of constant euphoria. I was in awe of everything. The neon lights, the incredible efficiency of the trains, the food. It felt like I was living inside a movie set. That's the honeymoon phase, where every difference feels charming or exotic.
I've heard that phase usually lasts a few weeks. What was the turning point for you? When did the charm start to wear off?
It happened about 3 months in. The novelty vanished and was replaced with the negotiation phase. Suddenly, the little things started to irritate me, not being able to read the mail or realizing that I was accidentally being rude because I didn't understand the subtle social cues. It's like a mental fatigue. Your brain is constantly on because you can't rely on autopilot for anything.
That sounds exhausting. It's almost like your brain is running a marathon every time you go to the bank or try to order a coffee.
Exactly. And that leads to a feeling of alienation. You start to feel like a permanent outsider. I remember feeling very resentful one day just because I couldn't find a specific type of bread I liked. It sounds silly now, but in the moment, it felt like the world was against me.
It's not silly at all. I think that's a very common defense mechanism. When we feel overwhelmed, we start to romanticize our home country and criticize our new home. How did you move past that negativity?
You have to reach the adjustment phase. I had to stop comparing everything to how we do it back home. I had to accept that different isn't better or worse, it's just different. I started to develop a routine. Once I found a local gym and a favorite park, the environment felt less hostile and more like a community.
So it's about reconciling your expectations with reality. You stop fighting the culture and start flowing with it.
Precisely. It's about adaptation. You eventually reach the bicultural stage, where you feel comfortable in both worlds. But to get there, you have to survive the slump in the middle. You have to be patient with yourself and realize that feeling frustrated is a natural part of the transition.
That is such an important point for our audience. If you feel frustrated while living abroad, it doesn't mean you made a mistake, it just means you're right in the middle of the learning process. Now, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the language barrier. I know you weren't a total beginner when you moved, you had studied quite a bit. But how much did that classroom knowledge actually help when you landed?
Oh, Anna, it was a massive wake-up call. Studying in a controlled classroom environment and speaking to a native speaker on a busy street are two completely different beasts. I arrived thinking I was at an intermediate level, but the first time a taxi driver spoke to me at full speed with a local accent, I realized I was more of a lost beginner.
That is the classic reality check. I think many of our listeners feel that way. They can pass a grammar test, but they freeze up in a real conversation. Why do you think there is such a big discrepancy between the two?
It's the nuances. Textbooks teach you the most formal, correct way to say things, but real people use slang, idioms, and shortcuts. In Spain, people speak with such velocity and passion that by the time I translated the first sentence in my head, they were already on the fifth. It's mentally exhausting to keep up.
Did you find that people were patient with you, or did you feel a sense of pressure to be perfect?
At first, I was my own worst enemy. I was so afraid of making a grammatical mistake that I would stay silent. I was waiting for perfection before I would speak, but I quickly realized that silence is the enemy of fluency. You have to be proactive. If you wait for people to come to you and speak slowly, you'll never learn.
So how did you break that cycle of fear?
I had to adopt a growth mindset. I started treating every interaction like a game. I would force myself to go to the local bakery and strike up small talk. I'd ask about the ingredients or the weather, anything to get the words flowing. You have to be okay with looking a bit silly sometimes.
That's a great tip. Small talk is like a warm-up for your brain. Did you find that immersion actually lived up to the hype? Does it really make you learn faster?
It's definitely the fast track, but it's not magic. You don't just learn by osmosis by standing in a room where people are speaking a different language. You have to actively engage. The biggest breakthrough for me was when I stopped translating everything back into English in my head.
That's the holy grail of language learning. How did you reach that point where you started thinking in the local language?
It comes from repetition and context. Instead of learning a list of words, I learned chunks of language, phrases that I used every day. Eventually, those phrases became automatic. It's about building muscle memory for your tongue and your brain.
I love that. It's less about studying and more about training. And once you can communicate, even at a basic level, the whole experience of living abroad changes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Suddenly, you aren't just observing the culture from the outside, you're finally starting to participate in it.
One of the most common fears people have about moving abroad is the prospect of deep, crushing loneliness. You leave your childhood friends and your family behind, people who know your history. How did you go about building a brand new social circle from scratch?
It's a massive challenge, Anna. You realize very quickly that in your home country, your social life often happens by accident. But abroad, you have to be the architect of your own social life. You can't just sit in your apartment and wait for a knock on the door.
I had to become aggressively friendly, which was quite out of character for me.
Aggressively friendly. I love that. I imagine it involves saying yes to almost every invitation that comes your way at the beginning.
Exactly. I joined local hobby groups, a running club in Madrid and a photography class in Tokyo. Having a shared interest is vital because it provides a crutch for the conversation. You aren't just staring at each other trying to think of things to say, you're talking about the camera settings or the route of the run. It makes the interaction feel less forced.
That's a great tip. But what about the expat bubble? A lot of foreigners only hang out with other foreigners. Is that a trap or a safety net?
It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, other expats are a lifesaver. They understand the frustrations of the visa office or the specific type of homesickness you're feeling. There's an immediate bond because you're all in the same boat. But, on the other hand, if you only hang out in that bubble, you never truly integrate.
I've noticed that. Some people live in a country for 5 years but only have friends from their own country. It seems like a wasted opportunity to understand the local perspective, doesn't it?
It really is. The problem is, making local friends is much harder. They already have their families and their lifelong friends. They're not necessarily looking for new people. You have to prove that you were there for the long haul. Learning the language, as we discussed, is the first step to showing you are sincere about joining their community.
Did you find a significant difference in friendship styles between Spain and Japan?
Oh, absolutely. In Spain, social life is very spontaneous. You might meet someone at a bar and be invited to a family dinner the next day. It's very warm and open. In Japan, friendships often develop more slowly and require more consistency. It's about showing up to the same place at the same time for months until you are considered part of the inner circle.
That requires a lot of persistence. It sounds like you need a thick skin because you're going to face a lot of polite rejection or just general indifference before you find your tribe.
Definitely. But once you make that first local friend, everything changes. They become your cultural ambassador. They explain the jokes you don't get, the food you've never tried, and the unwritten rules of the society. That's when a foreign city starts to feel like a home rather than just a destination.
We've talked about the emotional and social side of things, but let's talk about something much more tangible: money. There's a common myth that living abroad is either a permanent vacation or an impossible expense. What was the reality for you? Was it as expensive as people think?
It's a bit of a paradox, Anna. In some ways, it was cheaper, and in others, it was significantly more draining. People often make the mistake of looking only at the sticker price of rent or a meal. They forget about the upfront costs. When I moved to Tokyo, the key money and apartment deposits were astronomical. I had to pay nearly 4 months' worth of rent before I even stepped foot in my new place.
4 months? That's a huge financial burden right at the start. I think many people overlook those startup costs. They focus on the monthly budget but forget about the initial outlay.
Exactly. And then there are the hidden costs, things like mandatory health insurance, residency fees, or even just buying all the basic household items you couldn't pack in your suitcase. If you aren't careful, your savings can dwindle much faster than you anticipated.
And let's not forget the currency confusion. When you first move, you're constantly converting prices back to your home currency, aren't you? This coffee is €4, which is, wait, how many dollars?
I did that for months. It's a dangerous habit. You have to stop thinking in your old currency because your purchasing power has changed. If you're earning in the local currency, you have to live by the local economy. If I kept comparing Tokyo prices to my hometown in the US, I would have been too terrified to buy groceries.
That's a very astute observation. It's about recalibrating your brain. Did you find that you had to change your spending habits entirely?
Definitely. In Spain, I learned to eat like a local, shopping at the street markets instead of the international supermarkets. It was not only cheaper, but a better way to immerse myself. You have to be resourceful. You find the hacks that locals use, like specific transport passes or discount days.
It sounds like living abroad turns you into a bit of a financial strategist. You have to be much more diligent with your tracking.
You do. I always recommend that anyone planning a move should have a buffer, an emergency fund that stays untouched.
You don't want to be in a foreign country, perhaps with a language barrier, and have a financial crisis, like a medical emergency or a sudden flight home. Having that safety net provides a lot of peace of mind.
So it's not just about having enough to get by, it's about having enough to handle the unexpected. It's better to be overprepared than to find yourself in a precarious situation.
Precisely. It's all part of the growth we talked about. Managing a budget in a foreign language and currency is like a masterclass in adulting.
Speaking of adulting and finances, that leads us to the source of that money, your career. How does one actually manage to work in a whole different system? Did you feel like moving abroad was a detour for your career, or did it actually help you climb the ladder?
That's a great question, Anna. Initially, I was worried that taking a job in a different country might be seen as a gap year or just a long vacation by future employers. But I quickly realized that the international experience was a massive asset. It wasn't just about the job title, it was about the resilience and adaptability I developed.
I can see that. In a globalized world, companies are looking for people who can navigate different cultural contexts. But surely the actual work environment must have been a shock. Every country has its own office culture.
Oh, absolutely. The contrast was stark. In Tokyo, the work culture is built on consensus and long hours. You don't just make a decision on your own, you have to consult everyone involved. In Spain, it was much more about personal relationships and networking. If you didn't have a good rapport with your colleagues, it was very difficult to get things done.
That sounds like a steep learning curve. You're not just learning new tasks, you're learning a whole new way of interacting. Did you find it difficult to prove your competence when you were still struggling with the language or the local customs?
Definitely. There were times I felt like I was being underestimated because I couldn't express my ideas with the same sophistication I have in English. I had to work twice as hard to show that I was capable. But that struggle actually forced me to become a better communicator. I learned to be more concise and to listen more intently.
So you were essentially gaining soft skills that you wouldn't have acquired if you stayed in your comfort zone. Things like cross-cultural communication and problem solving under pressure.
Exactly. These are what we call transferable skills. Whether I'm working in Madrid, Tokyo, or New York, the ability to read a room and understand different perspectives is priceless. It also gave me a much broader global outlook. I stopped seeing business problems through a narrow local lens and started seeing the bigger picture.
Do you think it made you more marketable when you eventually looked for new opportunities?
Without a doubt, employers today value cultural intelligence. Showing that you can relocate to a foreign country, settle in, and perform well in a job is a huge testament to your character. It shows you aren't afraid of uncertainty.
It seems like living abroad is almost like an intensive leadership retreat. It strips away everything familiar and forces you to rebuild your professional identity.
Precisely. It's not just about the lines on your CV, it's about the person you become behind those lines. You become someone who can thrive in any environment, and that is a very powerful position to be in.
Even with a thriving career and a new circle of friends, there is a shadow that follows almost every expat: homesickness. It's not just about missing people, it's a deep longing for the familiar, isn't it? Did you ever hit a wall where you just wanted to throw in the towel and go home?
Oh, frequently, Anna. Homesickness isn't a constant ache. It's more like a wave that hits you when you least expect it. It could be triggered by a specific smell, a song, or even just a rainy Sunday afternoon. For me, it usually peaked during the holidays. Seeing photos of my family gathered around a table back home while I was eating takeout in a tiny Tokyo apartment was, well, it was melancholy.
That FOMO, fear of missing out, is so real. You realize that life back home is a moving train and it's continuing without you. How did you handle that sense of detachment?
It's a delicate balance. On one hand, technology is a godsend. Being able to video call my parents or group chat with my friends made the thousands of miles feel like nothing. But on the other hand, it can be a hindrance to your adjustment. If you spent 4 hours a day talking to people back home, you aren't actually present in your new country.
That is a very profound point. You're living in a digital limbo, physically in one place but mentally in another. Did you have to set boundaries for yourself?
I did. I realized that checking in too often actually made my homesickness worse because it reminded me of what I was missing. I had to learn to be content with my own company and focus on building local roots. I started hosting orphan Thanksgiving or friend miss dinners for other expats who were in the same position.
I love that idea. It's about cultivating a chosen family. By taking care of others, you actually end up curing your own loneliness.
Exactly. But there's also a strange phenomenon called reverse homesickness. After a few years abroad, when I finally went back to visit my hometown, I felt like a stranger there too. My friends had moved on, the city had changed, and I had changed even more. It's a bit disorienting to realize you don't quite fit anywhere perfectly anymore.
I've heard that called the expat malady. You become a global citizen, but you lose that sense of having one specific home base. Is that a price worth paying?
I believe so. While it's bittersweet, it also means the whole world has become a potential home. You learn that home isn't a coordinates on a map, it's a state of mind and a collection of meaningful connections. It makes you more resilient because you know you can build a life anywhere.
That is a very beautiful way to look at it. It's about expanding your heart to hold two or more cultures at once, even if it feels a bit heavy sometimes. We're almost out of time, and it's been such an enlightening conversation, Mark. Before we sign off, I want to get down to the nitty-gritty. If you could sit down with our listeners who are currently staring at a visa application or a one-way ticket, what would be your golden rule?
My biggest piece of advice is this: lower your expectations, but raise your curiosity. A lot of people move abroad with a romanticized version of the country in their heads. They expect every day to be a postcard. When the reality of laundry, taxes, and traffic hits, they get disillusioned.
That is so true. You aren't going on a permanent holiday, you're just moving your life to a different set of coordinates. How can someone prepare for that mental shift?
You have to stop being a consumer of the culture and start being a contributor. Don't just look for what the country can give you, the food, the views, the photos, but look for how you can fit into the fabric of the society. Learn the history, understand the local politics, and respect the customs, even the ones that seem strange to you.
I think that's the difference between a tourist and a resident. A tourist observes, but a resident assimilates. What about the fear of wasting time? Some people worry that if they move abroad for 2 years and it doesn't work out, they've fallen behind their peers back home.
That is a fallacy, Anna. You can never waste time by expanding your worldview. Even if you move back after 6 months, you will return with a level of self-awareness that you could never have gained staying at home. You learn what your limits are, what your values are, and how you react to adversity. That is an education you can't buy in a university.
That sounds like the return on investment isn't necessarily financial, it's personal.
Exactly. It's about resilience. Life is going to throw curveballs at you no matter where you are. But if you've navigated a medical emergency in a language you barely speak, or managed to make a home in a city where you knew no one, you realize that you are capable of handling almost anything.
That's a powerful realization. It's like you've leveled up in the game of life. So, for those who are hesitant, who are waiting for a sign, what do you say?
Don't wait for the perfect moment because it's a mirage. It doesn't exist. You will never feel 100% ready, and your bank account will never feel full enough. Do your due diligence, save some money and do your research, but then just take the leap. The discomfort you feel at the beginning is just the feeling of your world getting bigger.
The discomfort is your world getting bigger. I love that. It's the perfect note to end on. Mark, thank you so much for being so candid and sharing your journey with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Anna. I hope this encourages someone out there to pack their bags and start their own adventure.
And to our wonderful audience on Daily English Dialogues, thank you for tuning in. We hope these advanced words and phrases help you not just in your English journey, but in your life journey as well. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. If you could live in any country tomorrow, where would it be? See you in the next episode.